The first thing that really stands out about Doom in this trailer is the green runes around his throne. If you look closely, they have the same kind of glowing energy we see around his gauntlets when he catches Thor's hammer. That little detail could be showing us how Doom actually gets his power, because in the comics, Victor Von Doom has always mixed science and magic. He's one of Marvel's greatest scientists, but he also studied sorcery and became powerful enough to challenge some of Earth's strongest magic users. That goes all the way back to his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 5, where Doom was introduced as Reed Richards' old college rival. Victor blamed Reed for the accident that scarred his face, and that rivalry eventually became one of the most important relationships in Marvel. Doom went on to become the ruler of Latveria and one of the most dangerous mystical figures on Earth. So seeing those runes built into his throne and armor feels very intentional, especially with the movie showing him doing something as insane as catching Mjolnir. And this becomes even more important once we get into the movie's bigger multiverse story. The trailer and the movie is pulling heavily from Jonathan Hickman's Time Runs Out and the 2015 Secret Wars, where universes are collapsing because of incursions, and Doom eventually gets his hand on an almost unimaginable amount of power. He uses that power to create Battleworld, piecing together what remains of different realities. So the runes are an early clue that Doom is already building the magical and technological foundation for something much bigger. The next big clue comes from the portrait inside Doom's castle, where we see him with a woman and a young boy. Marvel has now officially shown imagery centered around a woman and a child in its Doomsday material, while the film's story is confirmed to involve Doom coming from another universe. That makes this portrait pretty interesting, because it could be showing us the family that Doom lost before becoming the villain we see in the trailer. If his wife and son were taken from him because of the multiverse, that could give him a much more personal reason to want control over it. There's also the universe 828 connection, which is especially interesting because that's supposed to be the universe where the Fantastic Four are from. If Doom comes from the same reality as Reed and his family, then his connection to them could go way deeper than simply being another version of Doom. The trailer seems to be setting up Doom's history alongside the Fantastic Four, and that could explain why Reed becomes such an important person in the whole conflict. And this could connect really well to Doom's comic motivation. In the comics, losing his mother is one of the biggest things that shaped Victor, because he became obsessed with rescuing her soul and gaining enough power that nobody would ever have to suffer the way he did. So imagine that same idea being applied to his wife and son here. If Doom loses them because of some multiversal disaster, he could become obsessed with taking control of reality and preventing anyone else from losing their kids. That could even explain why characters like Love or Franklin Richards might become important to him, especially if their powers could help him recreate or preserve the life he lost. The third thing in the trailer is just how many different heroes are suddenly being pulled into the same fight. We see Sue Storm explaining the situation to a huge group that includes Namor, Wakandans, and members of the X-Men, which is a pretty crazy combination when you think about it. These characters have all been dealing with completely different problems and even come from different universes, but Doom is now important enough that everyone has to sit down and hear about him. The movie is bringing the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the Wakandans, the New Avengers, and X-Men together for the same multiversal threat. Again, we've got Steve Rogers and that long hair. The latest trailer gives us a much younger Steve with long hair and a beard, which is a pretty big change from the older Steve we saw at the end of Endgame, obviously. The look also feels very deliberate, especially because it resembles Steve's appearance during the Infinity War era. The interesting part is where this Steve might actually be living. One theory is that after going back to Peggy, Steve ended up staying in an alternate timeline during the 1960s or 70s, rather than simply returning to the exact timeline we know as Earth 616. That could also explain why the house we're seeing has that older style, and why Loki later appears there wearing his TVA gear. Some reports have even connected this Steve to Earth 828, the universe where the Fantastic Four are from. And if that's what happened, Steve's decision to stay with Peggy could become much more important to the story. He may have spent decades building a completely separate life only for that reality to eventually become connected to the multiversal crisis. Loki showing up at his house could mean the TVA has finally caught up with that timeline, possibly because something is happening that puts the entire branch at risk. So Steve's happy ending from Endgame might have accidentally placed him right in the middle of Doom's multiversal war. The fifth big detail is the destroyed Central Park. We get shots of Manhattan looking completely wrecked, and it looks like a massive fight has taken place there. That could be connected to the incursions, especially because the trailer seems to be building toward different realities crashing into each other. And this also brings us back to Reed because the incursion storyline puts him in one of the nastiest moral situations imaginable. In time runs out, the Illuminati realize that universes are colliding and start looking for ways to save their own reality, even if that means destroying another one. Reed is involved in trying to find a solution, while the whole situation becomes increasingly desperate as the number of surviving universes keeps shrinking. So the movie is borrowing from that storyline, and Doom could potentially use Reed's own intelligence against him. He could convince Reed to build some kind of machine or weapon designed to prevent an incursion, only for it to cause an even bigger catastrophe. That would make the Reed and Doom rivalry extremely personal, because Doom could look at Reed and say that his attempts to save everyone are exactly what helped destroy everything. And that's very close to the dynamic from Secret Wars, where Reed eventually confronts Doom over how he handled the destruction of the multiverse. The sixth big detail is Loki showing up in his TVA uniform inside Steve Rogers' house. That immediately connects the scene back to the ending of Loki, where Loki took his place at the center of the timelines and became responsible for keeping the multiverse together. Seeing him walking around in TVA gear again suggests that something has changed, because he apparently has a reason to leave that position and come looking for Steve. One possibility is that Loki is there because of Steve's timeline. If Steve really stayed in the past and created a branch instead of simply returning to the main timeline, that reality could eventually become unstable or collide with another universe. Loki may be coming to warn Steve about what's happening, or possibly to get him out before that timeline is destroyed, and that would give Steve's decision to live with Peggy some pretty serious consequences. Loki's new role is basically tied to the entire multiverse, so if Doom somehow manages to take that power for himself, he'd gain access to something far beyond normal magic. That's also very much in lines with Doom's comic history, where he has repeatedly stolen or absorbed power from beings far above his normal level. So if that green energy we keep seeing is connected to Loki and the World Tree, the movie could be showing us Doom taking control of the power that holds the multiverse together, which could explain how he could eventually reshape reality on the scale of Secret Wars. The seventh detail is Doom's army of Sentinels, and these machines have a pretty important history with the X-Men. The Sentinels first appeared in Uncanny X-Men 14 back in 1965, created by Bolivar Trask as giant robots designed to hunt mutants. They quickly became one of the biggest symbols of fear and hatred surrounding mutants, which makes their appearance here especially fitting with the X-Men finally being part of the MCU. And in the trailer, Doom completely controls them. We see the classic-looking Sentinels rising from the ground while they are surrounded by that green energy and mystical mist. Doom has clearly found a way to take these mutant hunting machines and turn them into his own army. He's combining the tech of the Sentinels with the supernatural power he's acquired, giving him an army that's much more dangerous than the machines we've seen before. It also fits perfectly with Doom's character, because he's always been someone who combines science, magic, and stolen power to create something even more powerful. The eighth, and probably the most important detail, is Doom's stolen life speech. He tells the heroes, "All of you have lived stolen lives, and now you must give them back." While we see characters like Scott and Cassie, Thor and Love, and Steve with his child, that makes it sound like Doom believes these people are living lives that were never supposed to exist in the first place. The footage also has Sue explaining that everything Victor loved was taken from him, so there seems to be a direct connection between Doom losing his family and his belief that everyone else has stolen something from the universe. And once you look at the characters shown during the speech, the idea gets even more interesting. Steve went back in time and built a life with Peggy. Thor took Love in after the events of Love and Thunder. Scott was separated from Cassie for years because of the snap and the quantum realm, while Loki escaped his original fate and ended up becoming the one holding the timelines together. The X-Men have also repeatedly changed their history, and Johnny and Franklin are shown in the middle of what appears to be a massive multiversal event. From Doom's perspective, all of these characters have somehow escaped the lives they were originally supposed to have. That could explain what Doom actually means when he says they have to give them back. He may believe the multiverse has been damaged because these heroes kept changing fate, saving people who were supposed to die, creating new timelines, or carrying people from one reality to another. And now Doom thinks he's the one who has to correct all of it. Reed even asks him, "Victor, did you do this?" Which strongly suggests Doom may have caused the destruction we're seeing. If that's the case, the whole movie could revolve around Doom trying to take back these stolen lives and rebuild reality according to his own idea of what the universe was supposed to be.